Whenever you're using an API inside of n8n and you hit the execute button and then you see that you only got a fraction of the data, then this is not a problem with n8n itself. It's more due to the fact that you most likely forgot to activate the pagination feature. As an example, you have a database and I have over 10,000 entries, and then you connect to this database by using an API. You hit execute and you just get, for instance, 10 results. Then this means that you have to loop through all the pages to gather more data. And that's also exactly what I will show you in this video based on two examples. First of all, we will have a look into the Google Search Console API, so how pagination works there. But we have also another example where we're using the API from SerpApi to fetch SERP results, because both APIs are paginated. So as an example, the maximum rows you can get in a single request from the Google Search Console API is 25,000 rows. And if you're using the SerpApi to fetch SERP results, then they also return usually only 10 results per request. And to give you another example to make it a little bit more clear, based on the SerpApi, let's say you want to build a rank tracker and then you have to search, let's say, for the first 50 or 100 results. And in this case, without pagination, it would not be possible because you would always fetch only the first 10 results, which means your automation would not work at all, or in other words, would be buggy. And the same for the Google Search Console API. Let's say you want to build a workflow where you optimize your article based on the previous performance. And let's say you have a really healthy site with a lot of traffic, which means most likely you will have more data than 25,000 rows for a specific time period. And in this case, you would also need to loop through the pages. So let's start with the first example where we have a look into the HTTP nodes where I fetch data from my website by using the Google Search Console API. And as you can also see, we have an example with pagination where we get roughly 10,000 items. And we have also another node without pagination where we just got 1,000 items. And you can also see here that we passed 6 items and here only 1 item. And let's start with the HTTP node without pagination. So it's quite easy. We have our method, then we have the URL. So in this case, it's the Search Analytics query endpoint where I have set a specific start and end date, also a row limit. And if I execute this one, then it will never ever return more than 1,000 rows because I have set the row limit. But let's say I have for this specific date range more than 25,000 rows, which is the maximum amount you can get from the Google Search Console API in a single request. Then this specific node would always miss some data because it doesn't matter if you have 50,000 rows, 100 million rows, it will only return 25,000 rows. And especially for analytics workflows, let's say you want to monitor your keyword rankings or generate the search performance, then you want to do it based on the complete data and not only on a fraction. Because if you are missing data, then also the results will be misleading. And for the pagination feature, the first part is actually the same, except that I set here the row limit to 2,000, because for this specific site, I don't have enough traffic for this time period to hit the limit of 25,000 rows. And for the pagination itself, the important part is here at the bottom where you have the options. And then you can simply select pagination, which will open up a few dropdowns. And for the pagination mode, it depends on the API. As an example, for the Google Search Console API, we want to increase the start row always by a specific offset. So let's say you want to gather all the data, then you would set here the row limit to 25,000. And after you got the data from the response, then you want to increase the start row, which we have here, by 25,000, and then set again the row limit to 25,000, which means in the first request, you will receive row 0 to 25,000. In the request after that, you will receive the rows from 25,000 to 50,000. So again, 25,000 new rows and so forth until there's no data available. And what happens here is quite easy. We update this JSON body here in each request and we append the key start row. And the value for that is of course dynamic because we have to take the current page into consideration. But the good thing is that n8n also provides for that specific variables. We have access to the current page, which means in the first run, we multiply something with 0, which is 0. In the next request, page count is 1, 2, 3, and so forth. So now you know how to fetch more rows, but we also need a condition when to stop, because most likely you don't want to fetch that much data since you don't want to break your automation, but you also don't want to run into an endless loop. And for that, we have here the pagination complete when, and for the options, we have if the response body is empty, or if we receive a specific status code, or if you want to use other, which means you can set an expression, which we also have to do for the Google Search Console API, because the response is never empty and we also don't receive a specific status code. But when there is no row available, then the array with the key rows is empty. So we do here a check. And if the array row has a length of 0, which means it's empty, then we stop. And if not, then we continue. But there would be also another option to limit it. Let's say you never want to fetch more than 10 pages or something similar, then you can toggle this option here and then set the max pages. This would be, for instance, something good for the SerpApi. And in case you also want to wait after every request, for instance, if you want to avoid rate limiting, then you can set here the delay time. And by the way, all the variables are also in the documentation for the HTTP node. So you have the variable page count in order to be able to access the current page. You have access to the request. So that is actually the body that you send to the API. And of course, you're also able to access the data from the response, because a lot of APIs return a link for the next page or also a token for the next page. And the next example makes that more clear, because SerpApi returns the next link. And first, let's have a look into the HTTP node without pagination. What we do here is we use the search endpoint to get the first turn SERP results. We set the country key, query, and also host language. And when we hit execute, then we get the current ads that are displayed for this query. We also get the organic results, AI overviews, and so forth. But in this example, the only thing that matters is at the very bottom where we have the SerpApi pagination. And as I said, we have the key next link. So if we use this link in the next request, then we would get the next 10 rows. So actually the second page. And you can also see that here in the link itself, because here are parameters where they set the start already to 10 for you. And if you want to use that pagination feature, then the only thing you have to do is to scroll down, activate the pagination. And in this example, the mode is response contains next URL. So exactly what we need for the next page. And in order to be able to also get the URL, which is here at the bottom, we have to get the data from the response. And then we have to kind of navigate to this key here, which is SerpApi pagination, and then access the value of the key next link. So that's actually what we are doing here. We have our response body, SerpApi pagination, and then next link. And as you can see, the result is exactly the link we have here. And then for the next request, this link is then used for the GET request, even though you cannot see it here. And let's come back to the example, for instance, where you want to build a rank tracking tool and you never want to fetch more than 10 pages because you say, okay, if I check the first 100 results, that's fine for me. And you could also toggle here, limit pages fetched, set it to 10, and then whatever is in the response body after 10 iterations, this node will stop. And that's it already for the video. In case you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. And in case you want to use this example as well, then you can find it within my free community under YouTube resources. I will also put the link into the description, and we will see each other in the next video.